The line stayed connected after my little girl thought she had pressed end, and what I overheard shattered my world. They were plotting to lock me away in a care facility because I had become an inconvenience. I kept quiet, yet deep inside, a vital piece of my spirit broke completely. I ended up unloading my property for nearly $900,000. The two of them returned from their corporate getaway beaming with joy, only to face a massive shock. Their house keys failed to turn the deadbolt. A letter sat waiting for them, and once they absorbed its words, the shouting matches began. And that realization hit me. They were never going to drop this. This entire ordeal was merely starting. Before diving deeper into this tale, make sure to hit that subscribe button for the Hope of Beacon and drop a comment telling us what part of the world you are tuning in from. My mobile chimed right when I was clearing away the final bites of my evening meal. It was late wife Ellen's special meatloaf formula, even if my attempts at baking it never quite captured her unique magic. Glancing down at the caller screen, a genuine grin spread across my face despite my lonely mood. It was Caitlin. "Hey, Dad, how are things going?" she asked. Her tone held that comforting affection that consistently made my heart ache with a mixture of deep adoration and profound solitude. I sank deeply into my late wife's favorite armchair, its material polished soft from countless nights she spent reading there. "Oh, you know how it is, honey," I replied, "just wrapped up supper and getting ready to catch the evening broadcast." I purposely left out the fact that my supper consisted of 3-day-old scraps, or that I had spent the last hour simply gazing at her mother's framed picture on our fireplace. "Are you getting enough nourishment? You realize the internet makes grocery delivery super easy these days, correct? I walked you through that software," she pressed. "I am getting plenty of food," I interjected softly. "Although I experienced a minor fright yesterday afternoon, I neglected to switch off the heating element beneath my coffee maker. Luckily, the burning scent reached me all the way in the family room." Silence hung on the line. I could easily envision her scowling, mimicking that exact expression she acquired from her mom. It was that identical tiny wrinkle forming right between her eyes. "Dad, maybe it is time we discuss hiring a professional to monitor you on a more consistent basis. My husband believes I am doing perfectly fine, Caitlin, truly. How is your work excursion treating you? You are out in Arizona, correct?" "Yeah, the convention wraps up tomorrow afternoon. My husband has been taking point on the majority of the customer appointments while I endure these never-ending seminars regarding online advertising shifts." She chuckled, yet the sound lacked genuine warmth. "Anyway, Dad, I really need to run. We have supper reservations alongside a few prospective financial backers." "Absolutely, my dear. I care for you deeply." "Care for you too, Dad. Make sure you are staying healthy, all right?" I listened to the disconnection beep, followed by shuffling noises. I figured she had tossed her smartphone into her handbag, and I reached over to terminate my side of the connection. However, that was when the voices drifted through. They were slightly muffled but distinctly audible via the active microphone. "Did you hear how fast his mind is slipping?" It was my daughter, but her tone had completely lost its previous affection. "He left the kitchen appliance running yesterday. What happens if he ignites the whole structure?" My fingers locked rigidly around the device. A freezing sensation radiated through my entire body. "He needs to be in an assisted living center, Caitlin." Her husband's tone was icy and completely transactional. "He is turning into an absolute dead weight, and you are fully aware of it. Your father is a decent guy, but living solo is no longer viable for him. That real estate is valued at roughly $1 million these days." My daughter's voice had morphed into something ruthlessly calculating. "Given the current housing climate in the city, we might secure $900,000, potentially higher." "Precisely," her partner chimed in, clearly thrilled by the prospect. "We dump the property, stick him in a respectable but affordable facility, and we can finally secure that dream residence up near the mountains we have been eyeing. My own flesh and blood chuckled. She genuinely chuckled. Good grief! You should have witnessed him on the phone just now. He was incredibly thankful just to chat with me. He is completely clueless about our scheme. If we delay this, his mental state will only decline further. We need to act immediately while he still has absolute faith in us. The device tumbled out of my paralyzed grip, bouncing loudly against the solid wood flooring that my deceased spouse and I had personally fitted over 2 decades prior. I had placed every single plank manually, hammering each fastener while dreaming about the legacy of our household. I remained seated within the abrupt quiet of my vacant residence, fixing my gaze on my wife's portrait. Her stare appeared to pierce straight into my soul, carrying a look I struggled to interpret. Was it letdown, a caution, or simply the grim wisdom possessed by individuals who have already departed this earth? The tall antique clock positioned in the corridor, a celebratory present from her a decade and a half ago, kept its rhythmic ticking in the deepening shadows. Beyond the walls, the initial bugs of the season commenced their twilight chorus within the flower beds she had originally cultivated, which I continued to nurture. A freezing, rigid sensation anchored itself inside my ribs, swapping out the affection I had experienced catching my child's voice mere seconds prior. My palms, roughened from years spent in the contracting trade, gradually tightened into solid fists. They assumed I was an inconvenience. They assumed my brain was scrambled, that I was powerless, prepped to be directed and tossed aside. They were already allocating my finances, already mapping out their fresh existence on top of my tombstone. Except I was not deceased yet, and I was nowhere near as scrambled as they assumed. I have no idea how much time passed while I remained stationed in the shadows, my late wife's image observing me from its metallic encasing on the side desk. The atmosphere inside the residence shifted, almost as though the sheetrock itself had absorbed my child's treason and was presently bracing for impact. My knees trembled slightly when I eventually rose to click on the illumination. The comforting glow draped across the gathering space we had decorated item by item. We had hand-picked every single element meticulously, funding them through immense compromise. There sat the maroon couch where my little girl would tuck her legs under her to finish school assignments. Over there was the wooden table I constructed out back, polishing the surface flawlessly while she occupied herself near my boots. I strolled into the cooking area and tugged the compartment where I stored ancient invoices and documents. My hand instinctively located the specific binder I desired. 2 decades worth of economic history that I never discarded simply because my wife consistently warned me about unforeseen necessities. College payment slips, 48 grand, scattered across 4 semesters. I recalled pulling consecutive shifts, returning to the house with cement powder coating my scalp and drywall residue wedged beneath my fingernails. She would have a warm mug prepared and rub my aching back while I squared away expenses right at this exact dining surface. "You are grinding yourself into dust," she mentioned one evening, observing me crunching numbers to cover the upcoming semester. "She merits a better life than we experienced. She possesses the intellect to achieve anything." My spouse had planted a kiss on my crown. "Simply ensure you do not hand her so much that she loses her appreciation." I really ought to have heeded that advice. Lord, I should have heeded it. The marriage invoices resided in that folder as well. 32 grand spent on a single afternoon. I had informed my daughter we could swing 5 grand, potentially 8 if we pushed our limits. Yet she wept. She legitimately wept over requiring her ultimate fantasy ceremony. I labored on my days off for half a year, laying floorboards for a builder buddy who compensated me off the books. "You are the greatest dad on the planet," she murmured into my ear while we swayed together on the dance floor, her bridal gown swishing against my borrowed formal wear. I will always remember this. Yet, she had discarded that memory. Just as she discarded the memory of the person who backed her initial vehicle financing when her own financial standing was inadequate. Just as she discarded the memory of the individual who pulled strings to secure her that promotional gig when she sat jobless for nearly a year post-college. I unearthed the banking records from a couple of years back, right after her husband was terminated from his advisory role under highly suspicious circumstances. They relocated into my spare rooms, supposedly just until he secured a fresh opportunity. I never demanded a dime for lodging. I covered the inflated electricity statements, procured meals for 3 grown individuals instead of one solitary survivor. Her husband would slap my back and declare me the most charitable individual in the state. My child would embrace me, promising they would reimburse me the second they regained stability. They had been completely stable for well over 12 months presently. Both secured lucrative positions, both pulling in more capital than I ever managed. Yet they never brought up relocating. They never brought up reimbursing me. The celebration meal I financed just the previous month cost $200 at an upscale meat parlor downtown, simply because her husband insisted they needed to commemorate their achievements. The mechanic invoice I absorbed when his luxury sedan required a fresh gearbox wiped out $3,000 from my rainy day savings. "He is practically a dad to me," her partner proclaimed to his buddies at their most recent cookout, draping an arm across my neck. "I hit the jackpot marrying into this clan." I had felt a sense of honor back then, a genuine pride in being the giving patriarch, the guy who supported his kin regardless of the personal toll. I wandered up the steps to the sleeping quarters I shared with my wife, which remained untouched for the past 2 years. Her accessory chest rested upon the vanity, her magnifying spectacles resting folded next to the light source. I yanked the lowest sliding box where our critical files were secured and retrieved our initial property document. The paperwork showed both our names from back in '99. No outstanding debts, no secondary signers, 0 legal tangles. It possessed my signature solely now that she had passed. Positioned there in the space where she endured her final moments, enveloped by every single thing we established in unison, I experienced an internal transformation. The agony lingered, piercing like shattered glass. Yet beneath that pain, a much firmer resolve began to crystallize. They intended to lock me away and liquidate my entire existence's labor. They assumed I had grown too elderly, too bewildered, too thankful for their meager scraps of affection to mount a defense. I gazed at her picture resting on the bedside table, recalling her specific vocal tone from decades past. "Simply ensure you do not hand her so much that she loses her appreciation." Well, my darling, our child had absolutely lost her appreciation. However, she was on the verge of discovering that her aging dad was not nearly as vulnerable as she presumed. I marched into my private study and extracted a contact square I had stashed inside a compartment for 3 years. It belonged to Todd Fisher, a property legal expert. My spouse demanded we consult him post-diagnosis just to ensure our legal house was immaculate. It was finally the moment for a secondary meeting. The following dawn, I paced through my property resembling a visitor viewing it for the initial time. However, rather than perceiving a sanctuary, I viewed it through the identical lens: my family used, square footage, market appraisal, convertible assets. Inside the cooking space, I slid my palm across the stone surface I had mounted personally. I had labored under artificial lighting following my standard shifts because we lacked the funds to contract professionals. She selected the aesthetic, a speckled gray accented by golden threads that captured the early sunlight perfectly. She brewed her morning beverage on this exact surface for 16 years, until the illness drained her vitality. I recalled the holiday morning when our toddler took her initial shaky strides right across this floor, moving from the cooling unit directly into her mother's waiting embrace. We both shed tears of pure happiness. She hoisted our little girl up, twirling her while I desperately fumbled to capture the moment on film. "Our infant is walking in our own residence," she murmured, moisture racing down her cheeks. In the residence we constructed specifically for her, the main gathering space contained a quarter-century of holiday mornings. I could vividly picture my 7-year-old's expression brightening at the manifestation of the miniature house I had dedicated 3 months to assembling in the workspace, toiling clandestinely after she drifted off to sleep. My wife stitched microscopic drapes for the tiny glass panes and fashioned diminutive furnishings out of cardboard and fabric remnants. "It looks exactly like our own residence," she squealed with delight, and it certainly did. I fabricated an exact duplicate, right down to the little protruding window in the section designated as her sleeping quarters. Constructing that protruding window drained half a year of extra shifts from my life. She spotted the concept in a publication and became enamored with the prospect of lounging there during late afternoons. I taught myself to slice angles I had never attempted before, verifying and re-verifying dimensions until my spine throbbed from navigating the scaffolding. "We lack the budget for this," she fretted when she caught me noting dimensions on the sheetrock. "If you desire it, you shall possess it," I reassured her. "I will figure out a way." I ascended the staircase to my daughter's former bedroom. It retained the pale yellow shade she selected for her sweet 16, still adorned with snapshots of her secondary school companions and university adventures. This was the space where I soothed her through agonizing infant colic, where we collaborated on math equations at the compact ivory workstation I built to slide flawlessly beneath the glass. The primary bedroom proved the most agonizing. Her half of the mattress still held her drinking vessel on the side table, alongside the placeholder stationed at page 247 of the paperback she never completed. I constructed these extensive wardrobes entirely by hand, tailoring the dimensions to match her stature flawlessly. Her garments continued to hang within, still emitting the subtle aroma of her signature scent. This represented the chamber where we mapped out our destiny, where we quietly discussed our aspirations for our child, and where she ultimately perished, gripping my fingers as medical equipment chimed all around us. "Swear to me you will not allow them to exploit you," she requested near the very end, her vocal cords producing merely a soft breath. "You are excessively pure, excessively charitable. Swear to me you will prioritize yourself." I made that vow, but I certainly had not upheld it, had I? Inside my study, I located the binder of building snapshots she had preserved. Images of me pouring the base concrete during the spring of '99, looking a quarter-century younger and 50 pounds more robust. Snaps of my team and I erecting the skeleton. Images of her sporting a protective helmet, delivering citrus drinks during sweltering afternoons, her stomach barely indicating her pregnancy. The economic files from that era painted the picture the photographs missed. A secondary property loan, a private advance from my sibling. She secured a fractional role with the local education board to assist with supply expenses. We consumed legumes and grains for countless weeks. We operated vehicles patched together with duct tape and sheer willpower. But we manifested this dwelling using our perspiration, our compromises, our mutual devotion, and our dedication to the bloodline we were establishing. And currently, my offspring, the infant who took her first strides across this cooking area, the kid who frolicked in the lawn I personally designed, wished to liquidate everything and discard me like an obsolete sofa. I retrieved the legal expert's contact square from the compartment. Its borders were frayed from 3 years of sitting there, but the digits remained legible. They believed they were handling a disoriented senior who would accept any crumb of affection they tossed his way. They viewed me as fragile, powerless, and prepared to surrender my legacy without a struggle. They were on the verge of discovering precisely the magnitude of their miscalculation. I punched in his digits and waited as the line chimed, my fingers remaining as stable as a boulder. Beyond the glass, the spring morning shone brilliant and transparent. It was the precise type of weather my wife used to adore, a perfect atmosphere for initiating a fresh chapter. The legal practice of Fisher and Partners sat on the second story of an unassuming masonry structure on Colfax. It was the exact type of establishment that prioritized aiding ordinary folks with genuine crises over dazzling corporate accounts. I donned my finest tailoring, the deep, gray outfit my wife selected for me to utilize at her memorial, and showed up 15 minutes prior to my slot. My palms quivered only a fraction as I logged my arrival at the front desk. The lawyer appeared more youthful than my memory served, perhaps in his mid-50s, carrying graying edges and the tolerant disposition of an individual who had absorbed every domestic nightmare multiple times over. His workspace was packed with legal texts and domestic snapshots featuring his spouse, 2 adolescents, and a blonde canine. It mirrored the standard existence my wife and I strived to establish. "Pleasure seeing you again," he greeted, dispensing hot brew from a compact device in the corner. The robust aroma bridged the gap between official paperwork and storage drawers. "I recall you and your spouse from a few seasons ago. I extend my deepest sympathies for your bereavement." "I appreciate that," I replied, grabbing the mug and feeling stunned by the stability of my own tone. "I must consult you regarding a sensitive matter involving my child and her husband." He positioned himself behind his workstation, writing instrument prepped. "I am all ears." I laid out the entire situation, the active connection, the eavesdropped dialogue, their schemes to auction my property and stick me in an assisted living center. His facial expression remained neutral, though I noticed a marginal shake of his head when I detailed their enthusiasm to blow my funds on their mountain fantasy home. "Regrettably, this exact situation occurs far more frequently than one might assume," he stated, resting his pen and leaning backward. "Grown offspring frequently presume they possess superior judgment regarding their elderly relatives, particularly when significant wealth is in play. But they lack any actual legal authority to execute this, correct?" I pressed. "Let us begin with the fundamentals. The property deed lists your name exclusively following your spouse's death. Is that accurate?" "That is correct. We possessed it equally, but upon her passing, it shifted to my sole ownership instantly." "Then, strictly from a legal standpoint, your child and her partner hold 0 rights to your real estate. They are barred from auctioning it, barred from coercing you into a medical institution, and barred from executing any choices regarding your wealth without your direct approval." He retrieved a lined notepad and commenced jotting details. "The residence is your property. End of story." A wave of comfort washed over me, swiftly trailed by a more cutting realization. "So, assuming I preferred to auction it off personally, you hold the right to list it on the open market this very afternoon if you desire. It remains your asset, thus it remains your call." He paused his writing. "If I may inquire, what prompts you to entertain that path?" I recalled her chuckle when she labeled me a dead weight. I recalled his icy assessment of my monetary worth. I recalled a quarter-century of compromise minimized to a basic asset transfer. They assume I am defenseless and bewildered. They assume they can maneuver me like an old piece of furniture. My knuckles whitened against the ceramic mug. Perhaps the time has arrived to demonstrate exactly how agile my intellect remains. He remained silent for a beat, evaluating my expression. "The local property sector is unbelievably robust presently, particularly within your subdivision. Estates are transferring ownership within days. frequently landing all cash propositions exceeding the requested price. He hesitated. Assuming you genuinely desired to finalize a transaction rapidly prior to their return from their excursion, how fast could it legally finalize? Given the proper purchaser and numerous financial groups are hunting for estates resembling yours, we could wrap up a transaction within a 7-day window, potentially quicker. He leaned inward. However, this represents a massive life choice. Once the transaction completes, reversing it is impossible. I constructed that dwelling using my own labor, Mr. Fisher. Every single plank, every single fastener, every personalized element. I possess total clarity regarding my actions. We consumed the subsequent hour navigating logistics, monetary appraisals, liquid purchaser circles, and official mandates. He detailed that he could organize everything within a single day if I remained dedicated to the process. The advisory charge sits at $200, he mentioned as I gathered my things. Should you opt to advance, that amount credits toward my transactional fees. I handed over paper currency, experiencing a mental clarity I had lacked for months. Strolling back to my vehicle under the spring rays, my mobile vibrated within my trousers. Her name flashed across the display, and for the initial time following her treason, a grin touched my lips. It chimed once, twice, a third time. I envisioned her standing in some desert hotel reception area, likely checking her timepiece, questioning why her subservient aging parent was not leaping to respond to her check-in. Let her speculate. Let the two of them construct their fantasies regarding my future, my residence, my existence. They were heading toward the shock of a lifetime. The device continued vibrating as I hoisted myself into my vehicle. The legal card sat safely inside my billfold, and a strategy began crystallizing in my brain. It was a strategy designed to educate my unappreciative offspring about precisely who she was messing with. I constructed my existence from scratch once prior. I was undoubtedly capable of dismantling it and reconstructing it entirely on my own conditions. The buzzing ultimately ceased, yet I recognized she would attempt again. She perpetually did whenever she required assistance from the old guy. This round, she was destined to receive significantly more than she anticipated. By the moment I pulled onto my concrete driveway, self-assurance had completely ousted the trembling in my digits. The lawyer's phrasing resonated deeply. It is your asset, your call. A quarter-century of hesitation and self-questioning vanished like morning mist beneath the blazing sun. I was securing my entryway when the device buzzed again. Peering through the glass, I noticed it vibrating on the kitchen island where I abandoned it. Her caller ID illuminated the glass, and I allowed myself another smile. Let her boil for a second. Let her ponder why her overly thankful father wasn't rushing to grab the receiver. I dispensed a glass of hydration, inhaled deeply, and answered on the 6th ring. "Dad, finally!" Her enthusiasm sounded incredibly synthetic. "I was beginning to panic when you failed to pick up earlier. Apologies, honey. I was out handling a few chores." I maintained a genial grandfatherly cadence. "How is the desert treating you?" "Oh, you understand how these corporate gatherings operate. But pay attention, I possess the most fantastic update." She paused to build suspense. "We have been orchestrating something incredibly spectacular for you." I squeezed the device harder, my knuckles draining of color. "We wish to sponsor a getaway for you. You are owed some downtime after everything you endured following Mom's passing." Her pitch carried that rehearsed compassion I finally identified as sheer manipulation. "We located this gorgeous destination. It functions like a vacation spot, yet features clinical personnel on standby, just in case you require assistance." A vacation spot featuring clinical personnel. My jaw locked so intensely I feared my molars would fracture. That appears wonderful, honey. You truly did not have to exert such effort on my behalf. Ridiculous. You are blood. His voice drifted through the background. He was definitely eavesdropping via the loudspeaker. We already finalized the bookings. What timeline were you considering? I choked out, fully aware they desired me vanished before they arrived to seize their windfall. We intend to be back by next Friday, she stated. We crossed our fingers you might be prepped by that date. Just box up some apparel and personal goods. You understand, the bare necessities. The bare necessities, excluding the memory books my wife meticulously organized, excluding the furnishings I built manually, merely the bare necessities for a senior being hurried off to his demise. As it happens, I have a little shock planned for you two as well, for when you return. Oh, Dad, what sort of shock? She sounded legitimately thrilled, likely assuming I signed over the deed or simplified their task somehow. I drifted toward the projecting window I fabricated for my spouse, gazing out at the flora she cultivated, the wooden swing where we spent endless twilights mapping our destiny. It is a project I have been developing since our previous chat. I believe you will be utterly astounded. You are too kind, Dad. We can hash out all the details upon our return. All right, catch some sleep and we will handle everything else. Kind. She labeled me kind while plotting to hijack my existence. I certainly will, honey. I care for you. Care for you too, Dad. Catch you Friday. The connection severed and I placed the device down with hands firmer than they had been in seasons. I navigated to my study and powered up my computer. The display flared to life, presenting avenues I never previously entertained. My fingertips hovered above the keys for a fraction of a second before typing, local property brokers. The resulting list flooded my monitor like munitions in a conflict I was finally prepared to wage. I remained consistently systematic. 2.5 decades working as a structural professional conditioned me to investigate obsessively prior to executing a choice. This evening, that systematic trait served an entirely distinct objective. I browsed through broker profiles, weighing their closing percentages and buyer reviews identically to how I once evaluated industrial metal vendors. Upscale neighborhoods where structures moved for the exact figures my family was currently spending in their imaginations. A single identity continually dominated the top rankings. Brian Connor, a guy in his early 40s specializing in rapid closures, boasting an 18-day average from market entry to finalization. His portrait depicted a corporate grin, an assured gaze, the exact breed of individual capable of executing tasks swiftly. His reviews mirrored precisely what I required. Sold our place in under a week. Liquid purchaser secured in 48 hours. Flawless finalization, 0 headaches. I locked eyes with his direct digits highlighted prominently beneath his name. This represented the turning point, the action that would catalyze the entire sequence. Once I executed this dial, reversing course to become the compliant, appreciative elder my family anticipated would be impossible. My wife's picture on the workstation appeared to monitor me. I practically caught her tone. Are you positive about this? I remained positive. More positive than I had felt regarding anything since her burial. I punched in his digits using unshakable fingers. Connor Real Estate, how might I assist? My name is Roy Hayes. I am looking to offload my residence immediately. How quickly can this process actually conclude? Well, sir, that relies on numerous elements. However, assuming the correct asset and valuation tactic, I have sealed agreements in a mere 10 days utilizing liquid purchasers. What sort of schedule are you desiring? 10 days? My pulse pounded against my sternum. That rapidly? Without a doubt. The local sector is scorching right now, notably for meticulously preserved assets in legacy communities. Could you describe your property? I scanned my cooking area, evaluating it through an investor's perspective for the initial time. 2 levels, 3,400 square feet, constructed in '99. 3 sleeping quarters, 2.5 washrooms. I kept it immaculate, handled the majority of the upkeep personally. His tone grew sharply attentive. That aligns perfectly with what multiple investment groups I represent are hunting for. Sole proprietor, pristine condition, legacy community. Those constitute premium selling factors. Would you entertain a physical evaluation? How fast could you drop by? I can arrive this afternoon, assuming you are free. Perhaps around 3 o'clock. I checked the timepiece. It sat barely past midday. 3 o'clock is ideal. Let me provide the location. Following the disconnection, I remained seated in the abrupt silence of my cooking space. The sheer weight of what I had unleashed started sinking into my ribs. In 3 hours, an unknown individual would march through the sanctuary my wife and I erected, slapping monetary figures onto our shared history. I dedicated the subsequent 2 hours to manic scrubbing, an old reflex from her era, when she demanded the environment be immaculate for any guest. I wiped down the projecting window, aligned the decorative cushions on the sofa, and ensured every counter sparkled. Yet this scrubbing felt alien. I was not prepping for visitors. I was prepping for execution. Precisely at 3 o'clock, the chime sounded. I flattened my collar, inhaled deeply, catching the aroma of her floral scent packet still tucked in the fabric closet, and marched toward the entryway. My palm vibrated slightly as it wrapped around the metal handle I mounted 15 years prior. Beyond this barrier lay either my rescue or my ruin. I twisted the mechanism and revealed my upcoming chapter. He matched his portrait flawlessly. Professional yet welcoming, possessing the assured posture birthed from countless lucrative negotiations. He gripped a leather binder and a digital screen, and the second he crossed the threshold, his gaze expanded. Incredible. He halted in my foyer, his eyes tracking up the decorative trim I secured manually, down to the wood flooring we selected as a team. This is precisely what I was crossing my fingers for. I observed him absorb the elements, the manner the afternoon sun pierced her projecting window, the fluid transition from the gathering area to the dining section, an effect I accomplished by tearing down a supportive partition and inserting a steel beam. His admiration felt authentic and expert. You were completely serious about upkeeping this location. He extracted his screen and began capturing images. These floors run everywhere. Original? Put them in myself back in 2001. She desired something permanent, so we opted for the thickest solid oak available. I realized I was slipping into the comfortable cadence of discussing my craftsmanship, feeling pride regardless of the surrounding chaos. And this culinary space? He paused at the stone counter, gliding his palm over the rim. Tailored fitting on every single inch. She chose the aesthetic, claiming the gold threads mirrored morning light. My vocal cords hitched marginally. I burned 3 weekends perfecting those dimensions. He tapped notes into his screen, documenting the specialized storage units, checking water fixtures and power sockets, with the meticulousness of an individual who understood buyer psychology. I must be blunt with you, sir. In my 15 years operating in this sector, I seldom encounter assets maintained to this caliber. I operated as an engineer. I trust in constructing things correctly the initial time. The results speak for themselves. He pointed toward the gathering space. Do you mind? I offered a nod, tailing him as he marveled at the unrestrictive layout, the integrated shelving bordering the hearth, and the way her stylistic choices transformed our building site into a sanctuary. This projecting window, custom job, constructed it for her. She desired a reading alcove. I envisioned her stationed there with her suspense paperbacks and midday beverage, her visual aids resting on her bridge. He was capturing dimensions now, his enthusiasm barely masked. I need to present you with some comparable market data. He displayed recent listings on his screen. Parallel assets within this district have been exchanging hands for $850,000 to $920,000. My chest constricted. That amount exceeded what my family estimated during their malicious chat. However, considering the state and tailored elements of your residence, I suggest we list it at $890,000. That figure should mobilize it swiftly while securing you premium compensation. $890,000. I collapsed heavily into her reading armchair, the digits tumbling through my skull. That high? I choked out. You are resting on a treasure chest. Assets like this rarely hit the open market, and definitely not in this flawless state. His voice projected the absolute certainty of a market expert. I currently possess an investment syndicate actively hunting for exactly this breed of asset. What sort of syndicate? They focus on premium leasing properties within established neighborhoods. They offer liquid cash, zero loan delays, zero repair haggling. They can seal the deal in 10 business days. 10 business days. My family would return from their desert trip in 8 days, anticipating discovering their compliant, cooperative father waiting for his resort transport. Where is the hidden trap? Why so rapid? He offered a grin. Zero traps. Liquid capital guarantees no banking hurdles or valuation snags that routinely destroy agreements. They conduct their own evaluations, but honestly, your residence sits in superior condition compared to most fresh builds I encounter. I scanned the gathering room where my child took her initial steps, where we hosted holiday mornings and cake celebrations, and where we enjoyed tranquil Sunday afternoons skimming the newsprint together. When would I be required to vacate? A standard agreement grants you a 30-day window post-closing, though they remain flexible should you require additional buffer time. The primary objective is clearing the deed and executing the documentation. I reflected on her voice over the connection, labeling me kind while scheming to rob my existence. I reflected on his icy logic, reducing me to an inconvenience requiring management. I reflected on my wife's caution regarding being excessively charitable, excessively naive. Let us proceed. His corporate facade cracked for a fraction of a second, displaying authentic thrill. Fantastic decision, sir. Let me dial them right this second. I observed him make the call, listening to him pitch my asset with the zeal of a pirate unearthing hidden gold. Immaculate condition, original owner, custom upgrades everywhere. He terminated the connection, wearing a massive grin. They wish to advance immediately. I can deliver the preliminary paperwork by tomorrow morning. The daylight was fading through her projecting window, throwing a golden hue across the space where I just consented to liquidate a quarter-century of my existence. Yet, for the initial time following that catastrophic phone call, I experienced an emotion I had lacked for an eternity. Authority. How does 9 in the morning sound? The inquiry lingered in the atmosphere like vapor, and I comprehended he awaited a response that would permanently alter everything. The tall clock in the corridor, her anniversary present from 15 years ago, pulsed rhythmically in the quiet. 9 in the morning sounds flawless. Following his departure, leaving behind guarantees of paperwork and closing schedules, I remained solitary inside the structure that would shortly belong to another party. The evening light beaming through her glass painted everything gold, resembling a snapshot of a reality I was preparing to exit. But I experienced zero sorrow. I experienced profound anticipation. He showed up the subsequent dawn, carrying paperwork, an official witness, and hot beverages for the group. It was the exact brand of corporate competence I persistently admired. I scrutinized every sentence with the diligence that forged me into a reliable engineer, verifying specifics identically to how I once verified schematics. Purchase figure, $890,000, liquid transaction. Finalization date, 10 business days post-signature. The witness, a middle-aged lady possessing gentle eyes, guided me through every autograph. Minimal stipulations, merely the deed investigation and ultimate walkthrough, and I am permitted to occupy the premises for 30 days post-finalization, if necessary. That is accurate, sir, although the majority of vendors opt to relocate sooner rather than later, simply for mental tranquility. Mental tranquility. I nearly chuckled aloud. The solitary mental tranquility I stood to gain would arrive upon witnessing their expressions when they realized what their inconvenience had accomplished. I executed my signature with unshakable digits, and instantly the sequence was activated. The initial 3 days dissolved into a haze of forms and evaluations. The deed organization commenced their dig through decades of archives. The syndicate dispatched their crew, a courteous team who praised my craftsmanship and discovered 0 issues to dispute. Your father-in-law genuinely understood his trade, one remarked to the buyer's representative, presuming I had already passed away. These floorings, this wiring, all premium grade. Between days 4 and 6, I transformed into an individual executing a covert operation. I investigated rental units via the internet, searching for a compact yet cozy space, a location where I could restart carrying nearly $900,000 in my accounts. I located a spot in the Highlands District, an elder complex featuring putting greens and a gathering hub. It was the exact type of environment my wife and I occasionally discussed for our twilight years. I additionally contacted holding facilities, deciding which of her possessions I would retain and which I must abandon for the incoming occupants. Her ceramics, absolutely. Her accessory chest, the memory albums, the bare necessities of a shared existence. Days 7 through 9 delivered an alien certainty I had missed for years. Every dawn I roused understanding. I was one stride closer to liberation, one stride closer to proving to my child that her disoriented senior was sharper than she ever fathomed. The neighbor lady noticed the commotion and inquired about the evaluators and corporate-looking individuals. Merely some renovations taking place, I responded, despising the partial deception, but understanding the complete reality would circulate through the block before I was prepared. On the 8th day, the broker phoned with ultimate verification. Everything is perfectly aligned for tomorrow's finalization. The purchasers are ecstatic regarding the evaluation data. The electronic transfer will execute the identical afternoon. You will gain access to the capital instantaneously. That evening, I filled a solitary travel bag with garments and personal items, not because I was migrating quite yet, but because I desired to be prepped for any scenario. I gazed at her picture, on our vanity, and murmured, "I pray you comprehend my actions." Friday dawn arrived luminous and transparent, the exact brand of spring morning she used to claim represented the city at its peak. I dressed meticulously in my finest tailoring, not the memorial outfit, but the dark blue one she purchased for our daughter's university commencement. The deed facility was an ocean of corporate competence and praise. The purchasers were backed by their legal counsel, an astutely observant woman who triple-verified every file. The broker managed the signatures like a maestro conducting a symphony. If you will just autograph right here and initial right there. Every pen stroke felt like slicing a shackle, the deed shift, the settlement document, the ultimate confirmation that the property situated at 1247 Maple Street no longer legally belonged to Roy Hayes. And here is your electronic transfer receipt. $890,000 minus transaction fees has successfully landed in your ledger. I stared blankly at the digits printed on the sheet. More capital than I had ever witnessed consolidated in a single location. more capital than my family dreamed their inconvenience could manipulate. We exchanged handshakes all around, everybody thrilled with the frictionless deal. The broker escorted me to my vehicle, pledging to remain accessible should I require property services down the road. You executed the correct decision, sir. Occasionally, a clean slate is precisely what we require. I navigated back through subdivisions I recognized for a quarter century, rolling past the primary academy where my little girl learned her alphabet, rolling past the green space where we strolled every Sunday morning. Yet, instead of sentimental longing, I experienced pure emancipation. I parked on my concrete pad and remained inside my vehicle, gazing at the structure that was officially no longer mine. The entryway keys felt massively dense inside my palm. However, tomorrow, I would surrender them to the incoming occupants and stroll away from this segment of my existence. They were scheduled to return from the desert in 3 days. They would show up anticipating discovering their compliant, cooperative father waiting to be shipped off to their medical resort. Instead, they were destined to encounter a vacant structure and an education they would never erase from their memories. I exited my vehicle and marched toward my entryway, grabbing my device to initiate the subsequent dial in a strategy that was functioning flawlessly. The motor clicked as its temperature dropped in my driveway, yet I struggled to switch off the ignition. I remained seated, glaring at the structure I fabricated manually, the structure that presently belonged to complete strangers, the structure where my family anticipated returning to discover their compliant, cooperative elder waiting to be packaged away. The entryway keys felt as heavy as lead within my palm. Incoming occupants or otherwise, I retained access privileges for 30 days, ample time to finish what I initiated. I navigated toward the coffee shop situated on Colfax and killed the engine in their parking zone. My fingers remained stable as I punched in directory assistance to locate a round-the-clock security technician. The rush charge would run an additional $200, but capital was formally a non-issue. AAA Emergency Services, Eddie speaking. I require every single entryway cylinder swapped out today. It is critical. What sort of window are we dealing with, sir? Immediately. I can pay in paper currency. I can arrive within 2 hours. Location? Back at the property, I awaited his arrival inside my vehicle, observing the neighbor lady hydrating her flower beds next door. She offered a wave, and I returned the gesture, my chest constricting with the realization that I was deceiving everyone who valued me. He showed up driving a transport packed with gear and metallic components. A guy likely in his 50s who had evidently witnessed every brand of security crisis the city could generate. "Safety breach, sir?" he questioned, evaluating my front entryway. "Shift in ownership dynamics. Safer than sorry." He bobbed his head as though he heard it constantly and commenced his labor. I watched him extract the mechanisms I mounted 15 years prior, the brass fixtures she selected because they complemented our knocker perfectly. "These are premium mechanisms," he noted while laboring. "Whoever mounted these clearly understood their craft." That was my work. I prefer tasks executed correctly. The fresh mechanisms shone silver rather than brass, contemporary rather than classic. They snapped uniquely when he evaluated them, a crisper, more industrial noise than the previous ones. "Here are your fresh access tools, sir. Triple copies for every cylinder. Main entry, rear entry, and the side garage access." He passed me a loop of metal that felt completely alien against my skin. "That runs $450, including the rush charge." I handed over paper currency from my billfold, fully aware 0 digital trails would link my identity to this swap. Following his departure, I stood within my vacant structure and initiated the most agonizing phase, condensing a quarter century of existence into items I could transport manually. Her accessory chest entered my travel bag initially. Following that went our matrimonial snapshots and the paperback she was skimming when she passed away, the placeholder permanently wedged at page 247. My professional diplomas, our vital files, and her preferred recipe guide featuring handwritten annotations scribbled in the borders. I abandoned practically everything else. The furnishings that narrated our history were forced to remain. The memory albums documenting my child's youth. Her garments remained suspended within our wardrobe, still emitting the faint aroma of her signature scent. During the packing process, I dialed the rental complex via my device, clarifying my need for a pre-furnished single-bedroom unit right away. "We possess a gorgeous space primed for instant move-in," stated the facility director, Mrs. Chen. "Monthly agreement structure, assuming you favor adaptability. I will secure it." I linked up with her at the rental community 60 minutes later. An unassuming yet pristine complex tailored for seniors, boasting a gathering hub and immaculately kept lawns. The single-bedroom space felt basic yet cozy, stocked with everything required to begin anew. "Paper currency deposits are absolutely acceptable, sir. When were you hoping to occupy the space?" "This evening." Her brow lifted marginally, yet she withheld inquiries. I authorized the agreement and surrendered the initial month's fee alongside the safety deposit. Nearly $3,000 that would have felt impossible to casually drop merely 2 weeks prior. Loading up my sedan under the descending twilight, I spotted the neighbor lady observing from her glass pane. She waved a second time, and I absorbed the gravity of every bond I was severing, every connection my family had forced me to slice away. I conducted one final patrol through the vacant spaces. My boots echoed uniquely now that the structure belonged to someone else. Inside the cooking space where she instructed our child on baking holiday treats. Inside the gathering space where we observed her shred wrapping paper on holiday mornings. Inside our sleeping quarters where my wife expelled her final breath while I gripped her fingers. "I apologize, darling," I stated aloud to her memory. "However, you would comprehend. You perpetually warned me I was excessively generous for my own well-being." I secured the fresh cylinders and drove away from Maple Street for potentially the ultimate time. My reflective mirror was packed with the existence I was abandoning forever. The sunlight was dipping when I pulled up to the rental complex, my sedan crammed with the bare necessities of my survival. I lugged my travel bag up to my fresh entryway, struggling with alien metal against alien mechanisms. Inside the compact space, I dropped my bag and instantly reached for my device. The concluding stage of my strategy mandated one additional dial. One concluding piece of the puzzle that would deliver my family the shock of their lifetime. The unit felt comparable to a roadside inn, practical yet devoid of spirit, featuring generic furnishings and the lingering aroma of commercial floor cleansers. I stood gripping my device, her snapshot already stationed on the bedside table, evaluating which financial institution would optimally shield nearly $900,000 from the offspring who felt entitled to it. I flipped open my computer on the compact eating surface and commenced searching for establishments that catered to massive injections of capital. Colorado Community Bank grabbed my focus. It was more compact than the national chains, emphasizing individual care and confidentiality, precisely what I required. Private Wealth Division, David Morrison speaking. "My name is Roy Hayes. I need to establish a ledger for a massive injection, roughly 190,000. The microscopic hesitation on the opposite end informed me he was rapidly adjusting his schedule. "We would be absolutely thrilled to assist you, sir. When might a sit-down be suitable?" "Monday morning, exactly 9. "Flawless. I will prepare all necessary documentation." The weekend unspooled before me, resembling unexplored wilderness. I had never resided anywhere aside from the structure we constructed as a team. This microscopic unit felt like banishment, yet it was banishment by my own hand. My decision, not theirs. Saturday dawn, I brewed hot liquid in the alien cooking nook and systematically unloaded my possessions. Her accessory chest rested on the vanity. My professional plaques lined the reading shelf. Our matrimonial snapshot sat beside the mattress where I would slumber solo in an environment that never hosted her presence. I navigated to the local market and procured supplies for a solitary individual. Basic dishes, absolutely nothing that demanded the elaborate culinary skills she adored. The register attendant, a youthful guy possessing gentle eyes, inquired if I recently relocated to the district. Just arrived, I informed him, beginning a fresh chapter. Sunday dawn, I stumbled upon a caffeine hub situated 3 blocks away. The server, a youthful lady sporting violet streaks in her mane, crafted the exact robust brew I favored. "You are fresh to the neighborhood," she noted, avoiding nosiness, simply projecting warmth. "Former engineer," I replied, seeking a more tranquil existence. "Well, you stumbled upon the proper district for that. The majority of our patrons are remarkably laid back." I occupied a seat near the glass with my mug, observing folks walk their canines and steer infant carriages, experiencing the exact brand of standard Sunday morning we used to cherish. However, instead of sorrow, I experienced an emotion I had not tasted in months: anticipation. Monday dawn, I donned my finest tailoring and navigated to the financial institution. The representative appeared more youthful than anticipated, roughly 45, projecting the specific corporate warmth developed from managing people's ultimate nest eggs. "What draws you to our institution, sir?" "I recently liquidated my property. I require a clean slate with a facility that prioritizes human connection over processing penalties." He bobbed his head with authentic comprehension. "We focus exclusively on that specific brand of care. Walk me through your requirements." I mapped out my scenario carefully. A surviving spouse who liquidated his domestic estate and demanded ironclad, reachable capital management. He posed considerate inquiries, avoiding probing past what was strictly mandatory for ledger creation. "I will need to digitally transfer the capital from my former establishment," I clarified. "Zero issues whatsoever. We can trigger that shift this afternoon, and the capital ought to solidify by Wednesday." He processed the forms with hushed competence. Web access, plastic purchasing tools, and paper drafts, the standard array. Considering the volume, I strongly advise our premium tier for supplementary shielding layers. I autographed forms that transformed me into an authorized patron, client number 847293, possessing command over nearly 900 grand that my family would never lay eyes upon. Tuesday and Wednesday drifted by in the bizarre cadence of my fresh schedule. Morning brew at the local hub. The server memorized my preference and asked regarding my weekend activities. Midday strolls around the district, unearthing a compact green space featuring seating where fellow seniors tossed crumbs to birds and scanned newsprints. Wednesday afternoon, the representative phoned, carrying the update I craved. "Your transfer successfully finalized. Your ledger is entirely operational." I terminated the connection and scanned my compact unit. Her snapshot watched me from the bedside table. I observed the basic existence I was forging from the debris of my child's treason. For the initial time following her passing, I felt completely authoritative over my personal trajectory. Wednesday twilight, I occupied my solitary chair. It was not her reading armchair, not the lounger where I absorbed her treason. Just a standard seat in a standard space that answered solely to me. I flipped open my computer and inputted compact surveillance gear into the query box. My fingers lingered over the keys, fully aware that the item I was about to purchase would document the ultimate chapter of my retribution. They were heading back on Friday, anticipating discovering their compliant elder primed for management. Instead, they were destined to learn that their inconvenience had transformed into their most massive headache. The query outcomes flooded my display with countless monitoring alternatives, spanning from glaring security lenses to gadgets masked as mundane household items. Following 30 minutes of investigation, I located my target, a cord-free miniature lens concealed inside what appeared to be a standard mobile power block. The technical details flawlessly satisfied my engineering brain. Wireless network integration with mobile application operation, movement-triggered capturing, 12 hours of battery endurance, and flawlessly crisp visual output. Crucially, it possessed the capability to broadcast live feeds straight to my mobile from any location with a web connection. I secured the purchase utilizing rush delivery, dropping an extra $40 to ensure it arrived by Thursday. The final price tag hit $149, a sum that would have caused me to pause merely 2 weeks ago, but presently barely registered in my mind. With the lens secured, I pivoted to the next critical component. The letter meant to clarify the entire situation when they realized their metal keys were useless. The initial attempt ran too furious, too exposed with the agony of their treason. The subsequent attempt read too robotic, lacking the intimate destruction they inflicted. During the third attempt, I nailed the perfect cadence, honorable yet crushing, affectionate yet absolute. I drafted it utilizing my precise engineering penmanship, the exact script my wife persistently praised. Dear Caitlin and Jeremy, if you are currently reviewing this document, it indicates my strategy functioned flawlessly. I eavesdropped on your telephone dialogue regarding locking me inside an assisted living facility because I was transforming into an inconvenience. I eavesdropped on you tallying the capital you plan to extract by auctioning my residence. The property has successfully been auctioned for $890,000 in liquid capital. Those funds rest securely within my fresh financial institution, where they shall remain untouched. I relocated to an environment where I am valued rather than merely endured. Do not stress over my well-being. Stress over your personal living arrangements. Your possessions have been boxed and are currently held at Denver Moving and Storage on Colfax. You possess a 30-day window to retrieve them before holding penalties commence. I surrendered everything I possessed to you for 42 years. You compensated me by scheming to lock me in storage so you could hijack my life's labor. I truly hope the education justified the price tag. Love, Dad. Thursday dawn, the delivery transport arrived at my unit delivering a compact package holding my monitoring gear. I dedicated 60 minutes inside my cooking space evaluating the gadget and mastering the mobile application. The visual clarity proved astonishingly crisp, and the sound capture was sensitive enough to record hushed dialogues. Thursday afternoon, I navigated to my previous property for the absolute final time. I utilized the motorized garage trigger I never handed over to them, securing my vehicle inside to dodge inquiries from the neighborhood. My palms quivered slightly as I marched toward the main entryway, clutching my fresh metal keys. Inside, the atmosphere continued to carry the aroma of home, her floral scent packets, the citrus, polish I rubbed onto the timber furnishings, the lingering ghost of a quarter-century of shared suppers. Yet fresh additions made my ribs ache, their travel bags stationed near the staircase, their correspondence scattered across the stone counter. Concrete proof that they treated my sanctuary as their personal storage locker. While orchestrating my banishment, I situated the lens block near the entryway power socket, angling it precisely to record anyone breaching the threshold. The perspective displayed on my mobile screen framed the total entry space, capturing the exact location where I intended to suspend my letter. I evaluated the movement sensor, pacing in and out of the lens path until I felt confident the machinery would document every second of their arrival. Following that, I secured the paper pouch against the interior of the main door at visual height. guaranteeing they could not possibly overlook it. Standing centrally within my gathering space for one concluding moment, I brushed the fireplace shelf where her portrait rested for 23 years. The incoming occupants would position their personal family snapshots right there, forging their own history inside the walls we saturated with affection. "The deed is done, darling," I murmured to her memory. "Righteousness achieved." I secured the structure utilizing my fresh metal, verified the lens broadcast one final time from my sedan, and navigated back to my unit. The movement sensor stood primed, the power cell hit maximum capacity, and my device sat ready to notify me the exact second they realized their metal no longer commanded the locks. Back inside my unit, I occupied my chair, gripping my device, observing the vacant threshold via the application interface. The time marker indicated 6:30 on Thursday twilight. Tomorrow, they would return from their corporate excursion, undoubtedly chatting about their medical facility blueprints and mentally blowing my capital. They possessed zero inkling that their highly appreciative elder had morphed into their most terrifying nightmare. I awoke Friday dawn, carrying the thrill of an individual preparing to witness righteousness following years of mistreatment. My hot brew possessed a superior flavor compared to recent weeks, and even the compact unit felt less restrictive as I settled into my chair, gripping my device. The application broadcasted my vacant former entryway, 4:30 in the afternoon. They ought to show up shortly. I memorized their transit habits flawlessly. She consistently demanded they depart the desert before midday to dodge congestion, and he drove precisely at the legal limit. They would roll onto my concrete pad within 60 minutes. I glanced at her portrait resting on my bedside table. "I pray you comprehend my actions, darling. They backed me into a corner." 5:15 in the afternoon. My device vibrated, indicating movement detection. A dark sport utility vehicle, his vehicle, rolled onto the concrete pad of my prior property. My pulse hammered violently against my ribs as I monitored the display. She exited initially, extending her limbs following the extensive transit. He emerged from the operator's side, dragging their travel bags from the cargo space. They carried themselves with the relaxed swagger of individuals arriving home to collect their windfall. I observed them near the main entryway. She dug her metal from her handbag while he deposited the luggage on the concrete. She slid her metal inside the cylinder I swapped out merely yesterday. The metal refused to rotate. She scowled, inspecting her metal loop. She attempted a second time, rattling the metal while her irritation mounted. "This is bizarre." Her voice drifted out of my device speaker. "My metal refuses to function." He stepped closer, his demeanor transitioning from exhausted to alarmed. "Allow me to test the rear entryway." I observed him vanish around the perimeter of the structure while she maintained her struggle against the main cylinder. When he returned 3 minutes later, his expression had darkened with sheer panic. "Rear entryway is sealed shut as well, and the motorized remote fails to trigger." His vocal tone carried the exact blade of terror I craved to witness. "Someone swapped out these cylinders." "What? That is inconceivable. He doesn't even possess contact info for any security technicians." He analyzed the main entryway with heightened scrutiny, his corporate fiscal intellect identifying disaster immediately. "These are freshly installed cylinders. This is no mistake." She extracted her mobile, using vibrating digits. "I am dialing his number." I observed her punch in my prior landline, the connection I severed permanently 3 days prior. Following numerous rings, her expression collapsed into bewilderment. "No pickup. It bypasses the messaging system entirely. Test his mobile device." "He lacks a mobile device, recall. We discussed procuring one for crises." Her tone fractured, revealing the initial trace of genuine horror. He was inspecting the glass panes presently, his previous swagger completely dissolved. "Right there. That pane is unlatched. I can hoist you upward. I observed my offspring shimmy through the cooking area pane I intentionally left unlatched. Her corporate attire snagged on the trim. She vanished indoors, and seconds later, the main door swung open from the inside. He entered carrying their luggage, and the two of them froze instantly when they spotted the pale paper pouch secured to the wood at visual height. Her palm quivered violently as she snatched down the pouch bearing both their names scripted in my precise handwriting. I shifted forward in my unit chair, gripping my device with twin hands as she ripped the seal apart. Her gaze tracked across my lettering while he scanned over her collarbone. I monitored their expressions morphing, bewilderment to alarm, alarm to denial, denial to absolute horror. He auctioned off the property. Her vocal cords peaked near a screech. How could he inflict this upon us? He ripped the letter from her grasp, reviewing it a second time as though the ink might alter its meaning. That scheming old monster. He played us from the jump. 890 grand. She began weeping presently, her meticulous cosmetics running down her face. He retained every penny. Those funds were intended for our upcoming chapter. Your upcoming chapter? He snapped aggressively, his facade of the dedicated son-in-law permanently disintegrating. That man is your parent. You were responsible for managing this situation better. My responsibility? She spun to face him, years of buried bitterness erupting to the surface. You are the individual who labeled him an inconvenience. You are the individual who aggressively advocated for the medical facility. Well, he absolutely was an inconvenience. Examine what he just inflicted upon us. He waved frantically around the space that no longer belonged to them. We are devoid of shelter. Our rental agreement terminates next week. The exquisite poetic justice resonated deeply within my core. They were bickering inside my former gathering space about lacking shelter, exactly as they plotted to strip me of mine via their medical facility. Contact legal counsel, she pleaded frantically. There must exist some loophole. He cannot simply auction the property without informing us. Using what capital? His voice oozed with pure scorn. Just to refresh your memory, I was terminated half a year ago, and your promotional paycheck barely covers our vehicle loans. Then secure another position. Where exactly do you assume fiscal institutions are queuing up to sign on advisors who were ousted for dubious activities? I observed my child's expression crumble completely as she processed the absolute magnitude of their reality. 0 property, 0 windfall, 0 reserves, and his permanently unemployable status finally brought into the light. How could he operate with such ruthlessness? She breathed out. The identical way you operated with ruthlessness when you labeled him an inconvenience and plotted to lock him in storage, he fired back. The senior citizen outsmarted us both. Through my mobile display, I observed them slump down onto my former furnishings that would disappear tomorrow when the incoming occupants seized control. She buried her face inside her palms while he glared at my letter, bearing the expression of a guy who finally realized he got thoroughly dismantled. I killed the broadcast. I witnessed plenty. Strolling into my compact cooking space, I popped the cork on her preferred vintage I rescued from the property. A 2018 bottle we preserved for a monumental event that never manifested. I tipped a portion into my glass and hoisted it toward her portrait. To you, my darling, righteousness achieved. The vintage tasted identical to triumph. They absorbed the education regarding what occurs when you attack the hand that sustains you. My device vibrated, showing a message from an unfamiliar digit, likely her attempting to ping me through some fresh avenue. I erased it without scanning the contents and completely killed the power on the device. Strolling to my glass pane, I gazed out at the metropolitan skyline bathed in gold by the descending sun. Somewhere across the metropolis, my child and her partner were absorbing the fallout of their malice. Somewhere inside my prior residence, they were realizing that their inconvenience had transformed into their most massive headache. For the initial time in 2 years following her passing, I felt absolutely liberated. I served as no one's inconvenience anymore. I reclaimed my own identity, possessing my own capital, my own decisions, and my own upcoming chapter stretching forward resembling a cleared highway. Roy Hayes vacated the premises permanently, and he was absolutely never turning around. If you found yourself gripped by this tale, ensure you smash that like button, subscribe to the Hope of Beacon, and share your perspective on this ultimate karma in the comments section below. To dive into our next amazing narrative, tap the video box floating on the left side of your screen. Thank you immensely for watching.